we came up with this idea, the team at Google.org and others, to start identifying some organizations that are really doing amazing work that we could find to support. And we found some of those. So tomorrow we're going to be announcing a total of 4 new investments in organizations that are working to advance racial justice. It's about $3 million in new Google.org grants in total. Please, this is under embargo. We're announcing tomorrow, so please, no tweeting and stuff and social networking stuffy about it. Until tomorrow. I wanted Justin Steele, who's been driving this on the part of Google.org, wanted Justin to come up and introduce the recipients with me. So why don't we do this like Oscar style? I do one, you do one. What do you say, right?
All right, I'm gonna have to speak into your mic like this though, so I think you might want to.
Mike.
Oh,
ha 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 ha.
It's Google. That's what we do. Okay.
Exactly. You thought you could get out of it? Ha. So we don't have an envelope, but anyway. So the first one that we're really fired up about is Dr. Jeff Duncan Andrade, the founder of Rosenthal Concrete, which is an amazing community school in Oakland that's doing fantastic work. So Jeff, welcome. Thank you.
All right, come on up, Jeff. All right, the next set of leaders we want to bring up are from the San Francisco Unified School District. We have Superintendent Richard Carranza here with us, as well as Landon Dickey, who leads the My Brothers and Sisters Keeper program at San Francisco Unified. So, gentlemen, come on up.
Good to meet you, man. Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, you're doing so well. I'll do the last one.
All right. The next person we're going to invite up is just a close friend, and I admire her deeply, Alexandra Bernadotte, who is the founder and CEO of Beyond 12. It's a college success program. She's using technology, doing amazing things. Come on up, Alex.
Congratulations. Thank you. And finally, we have really honored to have with us today Bryan Stevenson, who's the founder and executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative based in Alabama, who's going to linger on the stage for a bit and talk to us. But Bryan, come on up. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, we're just going to do a quick photo op, and then we're going to let Bryan speak to us.
Somebody taking a picture? Who's taking a picture? Cameras? Thank you. All right. Got it. Thanks. Another round for our great recipients. Thank you. So Bryan needs no introduction, so I'm not going to give him one, but or much of one. But the work that he is doing on dealing with the massive problems of mass incarceration, disparities in our justice system is amazing, and we couldn't be more honored to support his work. So with that, I give you Bryan Stevenson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm extremely honored, privileged to be in this space, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of the Google community now as a partner in this important racial justice work. Google has changed the world. You've created a way of thinking about information and accessing information that has an impact on the world that can't be turned around. I wanted to spend a few minutes today to urge you to change the world when it comes to justice and equity as well. And you can do that through the incredible technology that you have done, that you've created, that you've managed. But there's some other things that we can do as well. I think that we're really living at a time, particularly in this country, where there are some tremendous, profound problems. In 1972, there were 300,000 people in jails and prisons. Today, there are 2.3 million. The United States now has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We have 6 million people on probation or parole. There are 70 million Americans with criminal arrests, which means that when they try to get a job or get a loan, they're disfavored. The percentage of women going to prison has increased 640% in the last 20 years. 70% of these women are single parents with minor children, which means that when they go to prison, their children get displaced. Half the people in our jails and prisons suffer from mental illness. The poor mentally disabled in our country are being swept up by a massive system of incarceration. The statistic that really bothers me is the one from the Bureau of Justice. The Bureau of Justice now predicts that 1 in 3 black male babies born in America is expected to go to jail or prison during his lifetime. 1 in 3. That was not true in the 20th century. That was not true in the 19th century. It's become true in the 21st century. So I think we all have to find a way to change the world when it comes to justice, to change the world when it comes to equality and fairness. And there are 4 things I just want to briefly talk to you about. My work at the Equal Justice Initiative, our collaboration with Google is really about 4 things. I think to change the world, you've got to get proximate to the places where there is inequality, where there's bias and there's discrimination. You've got to get closer to the spaces where there's abuse and neglect. Many of us have been taught our whole lives that if there are bad schools, if there are places where there's violence, if there are places where there are drugs, if there's places where there's abuse, if there's places where there's a lot of despair, you should stay as far away from those places as possible. I'm here this afternoon to say the opposite. I actually think we actually have to get closer to the parts of our community, to the parts of our nation where people are suffering, where they're struggling, where there's abuse, where there's neglect, where there's despair, because in getting proximate to those spaces, we actually discover powers that we don't really appreciate that we have. You have more power to change the world than you sometimes recognize. And when you get proximate, you see how that power can be made manifest. I'm the product of someone's choice to get proximate. I grew up in a community where black children couldn't go to the public schools. I grew up in the rural South. When I was a little boy, you had to go to the colored school. When my dad was a teenager, there were no high schools for black children. I never thought I'd get to go to high school until lawyers came into our community and they made them open up the public schools. And because of that, I got to go to high school. And I graduated from high school and I got to go to college. Nobody in my family had gone to college, and I loved college. I went to a college in Pennsylvania. It was a beautiful campus. I was very active in music. I was very active in sports. I studied philosophy. And after a couple of years, I called my mom one day, and I said, "Mom, I love college." I said, "I'm going to stay in college the rest of my life." And my mother said, "I didn't go to college, but I don't think they're going to let you do that." I said, "No, Mom, they will. And when I was a senior, one day I was out on the hill, I was thinking what I thought were great deep thoughts, and somebody came up to me and said, "You're a philosophy major, and you're a senior. What are you going to do after you graduate?" And I heard this as a very hostile question because I realized nobody was going to pay me to philosophize when I graduated. And unlike all of you, I didn't know that in this country, if you want a graduate degree in history or English or political science, you actually have to know something about history, English, or political science to get admitted. So I kept looking, and to be honest, that's how I found law school. It was very clear. It was very clear to me that you don't need to know anything to go to law school. And so I signed up for that, and I'll be honest, I ended up at Harvard Law School, sitting in a classroom, 2 months into it, disillusioned, because I went there to deal with racial problems and poverty problems and justice problems, and it didn't seem like anybody was talking about race or poverty. And I could not find my way, and I started to reconcile, rationalize, taking a career in law that I knew was not going to be fully affirming. And then I went to Georgia, and I met condemned prisoners on death row. I met people literally dying for legal assistance. I saw this condemned people, and there was a humanity there. There was a desperation there, but there was a power there to do redemptive work that shook me. Proximity changed me. And I believe that proximity can empower you to help us change the world. I had a grandmother who was the daughter of people who were enslaved. And my grandmother would see me sometimes, and when she would see me, she would give me these hugs. She'd squeeze me so tightly I could barely breathe. And she'd let me go, and about an hour later, she'd say, "Bryan, do you still feel me hugging you?" And if I said no, she would jump on me again. And by the time I was 9 or 10, she had taught me, trained me to tell her, "Mama, I feel you hugging me all the time." And when we engage in poor communities with our talents and our resources and our hearts, when we allow the ideas in our mind to be fueled by some conviction in our heart, we can actually change the way our community responds to us. Proximity is power. Second thing, we can't actually change the world without changing the narratives that sustain the problems that we see. You see, behind mass incarceration, there are policy choices. We decided to deal with drug addiction and drug dependency as a crime issue. We could have said it's a health issue, which is what a lot of countries did, but we said, no, that's a crime issue. And because of that, we've now sent hundreds of thousands of people to jails and prisons who are not a threat to public safety. With alcoholism, we said that's a health issue. If we know someone who's an alcoholic and we see them drinking in a bar, we don't say, let's call the police. We call their friends, their family, we intervene. But with drugs, we said those are criminals. And now we have these 2.3 million people. We started passing these mandatory sentences. We created a culture that has been driven by the politics of fear and anger. Our politicians have been telling us, be afraid and be angry. And I will tell you that when you are led by fear and anger, you will tolerate inequality. You'll tolerate injustice. And we have to change that narrative. I represent children. We are in a country where we actually condemn children to die in prison. My clients got younger and younger. I represented a 14-year-old boy who lived in a household where his mother was repeatedly the target of a lot of domestic violence. This boy's mother had a boyfriend, and sometimes this man would start drinking and he'd get violent. One day, he'd been drinking, he walked into the kitchen, he walked up to this boy's mother, and he just punched her in the face. She fell down on the floor. She was bleeding and unconscious. Her child ran in there to try to help her recover, and he couldn't get her to wake up. He couldn't stop the bleeding. The man went into a bedroom and fell asleep, and after 10 minutes, this child thought his mom was dead. She wasn't dead, but he thought she was dead. And so this little boy got up and he walked into the bedroom. He walked over to a dresser drawer. He opened the drawer. He pulled out the handgun that he knew this man kept. And then he walked over to where the man was sleeping, and he pointed the gun at the man's head. The man was snoring, and after a few minutes, this child pulled the trigger and shot the man in the head. The man died instantly. This boy was very small for his age. He was about 5 feet tall. He weighed less than 100 pounds. He'd never been in trouble before. He had no prior juvenile adjudications. He was the kind of kid that might have been tried as a juvenile, but for the fact that the man that he shot and killed, well, that man, his mother's boyfriend, was a deputy sheriff. And because he was a deputy sheriff, the prosecutor insisted that this child be tried as an adult. And the judge certified him to stand trial as an adult, and they immediately placed him in the adult jail. He'd been there 3 days before his grandmother got me involved. I went to the jail to see this little boy. He came and he sat down. He wouldn't say a word. He just sat there. I started asking him questions, but he wouldn't say anything. I put my pen down. I said, look, I can't help you if you don't talk to me. You got to talk to me. He wouldn't say a word. He just kept staring. I got up. I walked around the table. I pulled my chair close to him. I said, come on, you got to talk to me. I can't help you if you don't talk to me. He wouldn't say a word. He just kept staring. I couldn't figure out what to do, so at some point I just leaned on him. I don't even know why. But when I leaned on him, he leaned back. And when he leaned back, I put my arm around him, and I said, come on, you got to talk to me. And that's when this little boy started to cry. And through his tears, he began talking to me not about what happened with the man, not about what happened with his mother. He started talking to me about what had happened at the jail. He told me on the first night several men had hurt him. He told me on the next night he'd been raped by several people. He told me on the night before I'd gotten there, so many people had hurt him, he couldn't remember how many there had been. I held this little boy while he cried hysterically for almost an hour. Broke my heart. I finally got him calm. I said, look, I'm going to get you out of here. You stay right here. And I never will forget that child grabbing me by the arm when I tried to leave and him saying, please, please don't go. I said, no, it's okay. I'm going to get you out of here. And I left that jail. And the question I had in my mind is, who is responsible for this? And the answer is, we are. We've actually allowed a narrative to emerge in this country that says that some children don't matter. We've allowed their victimization and their abuse. We've actually created this idea that all kids aren't kids, and we've got to change that narrative. There can be no great future for us if we throw children away. All children are children. And that narrative has to be the way we change. So, well, we've got to change the narrative about race. You see, I don't actually think we're free in America. I don't. And it doesn't matter how successful we are with technology, we are not free. We are haunted by the genocide that took place on these shores when white settlers came and the indigenous people, the native people, were slaughtered. We are a post-genocidal society, but we haven't done the things that post-genocidal societies are supposed to do. And that made us indifferent to racial bigotry and bias, and then we had this horrific era of slavery. And I don't believe that the great evil of American slavery was involuntary servitude. We are haunted by the legacy of slavery. The great evil of American slavery wasn't involuntary servitude and forced labor. The great evil of American slavery was the narrative of racial difference that we created to legitimate it. There was an ideology of white supremacy that we made up to make ourselves feel comfortable with slavery. And that was the true evil of American slavery. And if you read the 13th Amendment, we don't deal with that narrative of racial difference. We don't deal with that ideology of white supremacy. And because of that, I don't think slavery ended in 1865. I think it just evolved. It turned into decades of terror. It turned into decades of terror and lynching and violence. This country was undermined by decades of terrorism. Older people of color come up to me, they say, Mr. Stevenson, I get so angry when I hear somebody on TV talking about how we're dealing with terrorism for the first time in our nation's history after 9/11. They said, we grew up with terrorism. We had to worry about being bombed and lynched and menaced. This era was horrific. We brutalized people in plain sight. They didn't have to wear masks when they burned people at the stake, when they hanged people from trees. They stood there, unmasked, because it was terrorism. There was impunity. The demographic geography of this nation was shaped during terror. The African Americans in Oakland and Los Angeles and Seattle and Chicago and Cleveland and Detroit did not go to those communities as immigrants looking for new economic opportunities. They came to these communities as refugees and exiles from terror. And that trauma that they brought with them is the trauma and generational poverty and distress that we are still trying to address. That narrative has to change. We even have to change the narrative about civil rights. You know, I think we're too celebratory when we talk about civil rights in this country. Everybody gets to celebrate. I sort of have to say, when I hear people talking about the civil rights movement, it sounds like a 3-day carnival. On day 1, Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat on a bus. On day 2, Dr. King led a march on Washington. And on day 3, we just changed all the laws. And I mean, if that was our history, we'd be a great country, but that's not our history. Our history is that for decades in this country, we burdened and battered and excluded African Americans. We told black people, you're not good enough to vote just because you're black. We said, you can't go to school with us just because you're black. My parents were humiliated every day of their lives. Those signs that said white and colored weren't directions, they were injuries, they were assaults, and we never dealt with that. We tried to play it off, we tried to move on, and now we are burdened with a presumption of dangerousness and guilt in this country. People of color are burdened with that. It follows them, and it doesn't matter how smart you are, it doesn't matter even if you're a Googler. When you go into some spaces, there is this presumption of dangerousness and guilt, and it undermines your freedom. And we have to change that narrative if we really want to get free. We should have committed ourselves to truth and reconciliation after the Civil Rights Movement, but we didn't do that. In South Africa, there's a recognition that they had to have truth and reconciliation. In Rwanda, there is that recognition. In Germany, you go to Berlin, Germany, you can't go 100 meters in Berlin without seeing a marker or stone placed at the home of a Jewish family that was abducted during the time of the Holocaust. The Germans want you to go to Auschwitz and reflect soberly on that experience. In this country, we do the opposite. We don't talk about slavery. We don't talk about lynching. We don't talk about segregation, and we have to change that narrative. Third thing, we can't create more justice by just getting proximate and changing narratives. The third thing is that we have to be hopeful. You know, it requires hope to be innovative, no matter what you're talking about. You are hopeful about what you can do to design new futures, to create new pathways to information. But the same is true for justice. We've got to be hopeful about what we can do. Hope is what's essential for change. Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. I think hopelessness is the enemy of justice. And when you get hopeless about your capacity to contribute to the cause of ending poverty, creating justice, eliminating discrimination and bias, you become part of the problem. You've got to be hopeful. Hope will get you to stand up when other people say sit down. Hope will get you to speak when other people say be quiet. Your hope is essential if you're going to create justice. Fourth and finally, and I wish I could stop with 3, but the fourth one is hard. We can't create more justice by just getting proximate, by just changing narratives and just being hopeful. The fourth thing we've got to do is that we've got to be willing to do uncomfortable things. I've read and I've studied. I've looked for examples where injustice was ended, where oppression was overcome, where change came that was desperately needed when people only did what's comfortable and convenient, and I can't find it. Injustice is only overcome, oppression only ends, bias and bigotry only will change when we are willing to do uncomfortable things, inconvenient things. And it's hard, because we're humans and we like comfort. I like comfort. I'm not against comfort. I gave a talk in Mississippi. The people met me at the airport. They said, oh, Mr. Stevenson, we know all about you. We know what kind of lawyer you are. We know what kind of work you do. And we have to tell you that we're actually having our conference at the luxurious DoubleTree Hotel. And we decided that you wouldn't want to stay at the luxurious DoubleTree Hotel. We've asked one of the farmers to put you up at the barn. I said, what is wrong with you? I said, of course I want to stay at the luxurious DoubleTree Hotel. I like those cookies just like everybody else. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that sometimes you have to position yourself in difficult places and you've got to be a witness. I gave a talk in a church some years ago, and an older black man came into the church. He was sitting in a wheelchair. He was staring at me the whole time I was talking with this very stern, almost angry look on his face. He was distracting me. And I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And I got through my talk. People came up. They were very nice and appropriate, but that man kept sitting in the back staring. And when everybody else left, he got a young kid to wheel him up to me in the front of the church. And this older black man came down that aisle in this wheelchair with that very stern, almost angry look on his face. And when he got in front of me, he put his hand up and he said, do you know what you're doing? And I just stood there. And he asked me again, he said, do you know what you're doing? And I stepped back and I mumbled something. And then he asked me one more time. He said, do you know what you're doing? And then he looked at me and he said, I'm going to tell you what you're doing. And then this older black man looked at me and he said, you're beating the drum for justice. You keep beating the drum for justice. And I was so moved. I was also really relieved because I just didn't know what was going to happen. And then he grabbed me by my jacket and he pulled me into his wheelchair. He said, come here, come here, come here. I'm going to show you something. And this older man turned his head and he said, you see this scar I have behind my right ear? He said, I got that scar in Greene County, Alabama, 1963, trying to register people to vote. He turned his head. He said, you see this cut down here at the bottom of my neck? He said, I got that cut in Philadelphia, Mississippi, 1964, trying to register people to vote. He turned his head. He said, you see this dark spot? He said, that's my bruise. I got my bruise in Birmingham, Alabama, 1965, trying to register people to vote. He said, young man, I'm going to tell you something. He said, people look at me. They think I'm some old man sitting in a wheelchair covered with cuts and bruises and scars. He said, but I'm going to tell you something. He said, these aren't my cuts. These aren't my bruises. These aren't my scars. He said, these are my medals of honor. And I will tell you that when you get proximate, when you change narratives, when you're required to do hopeful things, when you do uncomfortable things, you get cut a little bit, you get nicked a little bit, but don't be afraid to do the things that create honor, even when they're hard. I believe really simple things. I believe that each of us is more than the worst thing we've ever done. I think if somebody tells a lie, they're not just a liar. I think if somebody kills somebody, they're not just a killer. And because of that, criminal justice reform has to happen. I also believe that in this country, the opposite of poverty is not wealth. I believe that we talk too much about money in America. I am persuaded that the opposite of poverty is justice. And when we do justice, we create a new world. And lastly, I believe that as much as I am impressed and inspired by all that comes out of this amazing space, I can't judge how we're doing. I can't judge how we're doing in this country. I can't judge how we're doing in Silicon Valley by looking at all the spectacular things that we create. They're important, don't get me wrong. But if you're going to judge the character of a community, if you're going to judge its commitment to justice and civility and the rule of law, you can't look at how they treat the rich and the powerful and privileged. You've got to look at how we are treating the poor and the incarcerated and the condemned. We with Google's support, are going to create a new narrative. We're going to create some amazing things. We're going to do some things that are digital. We're going to change the landscape. We want to change the iconography. I am so proud and excited that you are enabling Equal Justice Initiative to do that. But more than that, I'm excited that in this room there is the capacity, the power, the talent to change the world. And I think if we just get proximate, if we change these narratives, if we stay hopeful and we do some uncomfortable things, we will do it. Thank you so incredibly much for all of your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.